protecting people with pre-existing conditions. Virtually every family in Virginia has got somebody with some level of pre-existing condition. I got one of my kids who's got a type 1 diabetic. In the old days, she would have had a really hard time getting health insurance. So what's happened under Trump's effort to kind of undermine the Affordable Care Act is they say, well, we're going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, but what they've offered instead is what's called, they call them skinny plans, I call them junk plans, where, frankly, people are manipulated into buying an insurance plan thinking it's going to cover their pre-existing condition or thinking it's going to cover them when they go to the doc or the hospital. And they find these plans, while cheap on the front end, don't cover a lot of folks with pre-existing conditions, and they have huge, huge premiums. So, and huge copays. So I put together, there's a process in the Senate where if you want to go after a regulation, since this is Trump's effort at, he couldn't get a bill passed to override the ACA, he's tried to do this on a regulatory basis, offer these junk plans. You have a right, if you get 30 senators, to file what's called a Congressional Review Act, and I filed that, and that is something that Mitch McConnell can't stop from coming to the floor. So very shortly after we come back, every member of the Senate will have a chance to, actually vote to protect people with pre-existing conditions, or they'll vote no. So it will finally give us a little clarity on an issue that so far, at least, a lot of the Republicans have said, they want to protect this provision, but they've not been forced to take any vote on it.
I want to ask about the gig economy, because I know you've talked about it 2 or 3 years ago. Could you explain to folks what the gig economy is and what issues are you trying to address with your proposals?
Well, it's the gig economy is and I got very interested in this 3 or 4 years ago, when it looked like every job was going to become kind of like an Uber or a Postmates or others, where you could monetize your time in an informal working relationship. And that has not, it hasn't grown as fast as I think people initially thought, but there is a lot more independent contractor work, part-time work. Literally a third of the American workforce today is in some level of contingent work, whether it's gig work, whether it's part-time, whether it's independent contractor. My concern is that all of that portion of the workforce, if the economy turns down, these folks may be doing all right in terms of current income, but they get no benefits at all in this gig work or in this independent contractor work. And particularly, a lot of our kids have these arrangements. I mean, the old 20th century model where you go and work for the same job for 35 years, the way my dad did, those kind of careers aren't going to exist going forward. So I think in our country, we need to recognize we're not going to go back to everybody working full-time, long-term in the same place. We need a portable benefit system that says for every dollar you make, some portion of that dollar ought to go to a benefit bucket. And we can argue about how much the employer ought to kick in or not. But we ought to have that portable benefit attached to you and be portable so that as you move from job to job, you bring your benefits you've accrued with you, number one. And number two, one of the things, and this has to do not only with gig workers, but with all workers, increasingly with automation, artificial intelligence, globalization, no matter what kind of job you have, you're going to have to continue to increase your skills. And one of the ideas that I would hope that some of the Democratic candidates would take up, and it would be as big an idea as anything that Bernie and Elizabeth are talking about, is saying we ought to treat investment in human beings, in human capital, on a tax and accounting basis, at least as well as we treat investment in tangible goods that are research. Right now, you've got this circumstance where if you go out and spend $5,000 on a robot, you actually get a tax credit, which is much more powerful than a tax deduction. That robot is an asset. You can put it on your balance sheet, which increases the value of your company. And, you can brag about it if you're a public company. If you spend that same employer spends $5,000 training up people, you don't get a tax credit. It's actually viewed as a cost. There's no way that investment in human being is treated equally. So I'd like to create the equivalent of an R&D tax credit for investment in human beings. And that would go a long way, too, in the gig economy to make sure that people throughout their careers are going to keep getting the skills they need to make sure they can stay employed and stay competitive.
That's great. I'm going to end with this question because you got a tight schedule, and Nellie Decker told me to stay on task, okay? I'm going to end with the call, July 25th of this year. To the extent you're able to comment, because you may possibly be a juror in the Senate, could you give us your thoughts on what you see are the potential issues and prognostication for the next few weeks, if not the next couple of months, on this Ukraine issue?
Right. Well, one thing I can comment on is, what's already the president has disclosed. I don't know how anyone can think that the president's conversation with the Ukrainian president, where Americans and Virginians can read the words, where he clearly was asking for a favor and clearly implying that he could help Ukraine a lot more if they would help cooperate with him on digging up dirt on Biden. I've not had anyone, even any of his Trump's staunchest supporters, say that was a good call. Now, whether it rises to the level of impeachment will be some of the things the House are looking to. And frankly, and you were kind enough to mention about what Richard Burr and I am doing, we're having an inquiry as well from our Senate Intelligence Committee. I think keeping that inquiry bipartisan is so important because, people will view the House as partisan. They'll view the White House as partisan. I hope we can actually get to the facts. And some of the facts that I want to find out, and there seems to be at least allegations of this in the whistleblower's complaint, is that this call on July 25th was not some kind of one-off action where the president just made it up in the course of a conversation with the Ukrainian president. It sure as heck appears that this was part of a strategy that he and Rudy Giuliani had been cooking up for some time. And if that proves to be the case, and there's some, I think we've got to look at that evidence, that makes that July 25th call, I think, even more problematic and more inappropriate. So that's where we're looking. I also think that one of the things that's happened this week, independent of the specifics of the call, is the absolutely inappropriate charge by the president to somehow threaten the whistleblower and threaten any of the people that talked to the whistleblower when he made the comments that, somehow these are spies and it's treasonous, and we know how we used to take care of that in the old days. I've been really disappointed that more of my Republican colleagues, even if they want to try to defend him on others, haven't called out that just morally, inappropriately, and I think goes against the whole heart and soul of the whole whistleblower process.
Well, Senator Warner, you're a busy man. I wish you all the best. You honor me by coming on the Gene Rossi Show. Thank you.
Gene, thank you for, one, thank you for having me on, two, thank you for doing this show, and I know it is very informative, and you were very kind about some of your comments with me. I want to just say, I want to thank you for your career in terms of helping to preserve rule of law, working in the U.S. Attorney's Office. It is a long and distinguished career, and I know you've got a lot of public service still left in you, and that's good news for Virginia and for the country.
You're a good man. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Gene. Bye-bye.
Good luck. Bye-bye.